And Jeremy and I have worked together for several years on millions of dollars in federal grants from all different agencies. So we're very interested in the cause of getting STEM out in areas of the world where people would like to have more, but we certainly need more of it in the United States. Our kids don't seem to like to study science and math. They'd rather play on computers and watch television. So we're trying to get our kids excited about going into science as a career. Yes, ma'am.
Could you speak just a little slower because of our disasters
Yes.
today? We left our interpreters.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right.
And they speak English wonderfully.
I know. I've been
Just a
talking to
little
people.
slower.
Wonderful. You're right. All right. I'll slow down. Anyway, we have a problem in the United States with two things primarily. We have lots of problems in the United States. We have a couple problems we're talking about here today, and that is not having enough students who want to go into science and math and technology related careers. A lot of them just don't find that interesting. Also, we don't have really good communication between the public and the scientific community. The public in the United States, in large part, has no real understanding of science or direct connection to science, and as a result, they don't really understand why science is such a really important thing for our young people to want to get involved and go into. So we started science festivals as one way of bringing scientists, the business community, the educational community, and individual students and parents all together in a fun way where they could enjoy science and not be afraid of it, where they could get involved with math and technology and not be afraid of it but find it interesting, particularly when they're younger and they're still very formative. And that's why we call it a science festival. Normally in this country, a festival is something that's fun and exciting. I mean, like an art festival or a literature festival, but you wouldn't think of a science festival because science is scary. So how could that be a celebration of science? It doesn't make any sense, which is why we chose the name Science Festival, because we think it can make sense. And that's what we've really been doing, is trying to bring the community, the parents, the kids, the teachers, the real scientists who do research, and the people in the business community who employ that research in things to make life better for the people here and around the world, all together so that there can be some good communication. And I'm going to now turn you over to Dr. Jeremy Babendure, who he and I are big partners in this whole thing and have been for several years. And he's really the brains behind the operation today. I'm just helping out.
So great to meet everybody. We're really happy you're able to come all the way out to Scottsdale to meet us. When we were originally contacted by Lisa, I think she was originally thinking about Science Fair and that we were the Science Fair organization. And what we wanted to do is talk about what's actually a little bit different about science festivals. It's actually different than what you're seeing with the Science Fair right now at the International Science Fair. But actually there's several partners that are going to come talk today about how they've actually worked together with the Science Fair to actually enhance the event even further. And so I have a few slides that you can give you some intro to what science festivals are, and I'm hoping that will set the stage for this people we brought in. We brought a great mix of people from schools, we have people from cities, we have people from industry, and they're really trying to provide a perspective of how a community is really about the solution. And so, you know, one thing that we tend to ask a lot of the time is, how do we make science relevant? You know, we want to get kids, you know, often we try to do these things like robotics and experiments to get kids excited about science. And in Arizona, we actually have quite a bit of these opportunities all over the place. But a question that we tend to ask with science festivals is, how do we make science culturally relevant? So how do we make it something that we do as part of our communities, part of our everyday activities, that we enjoy art, we enjoy dance, we enjoy science, and how do we pull all these together to really have it as something that we celebrate and have excitement for? And so we tend to use strategies. A lot of these, you know, I'm not sure how to translate, but for example, we call it sneaky science. So how do we get science as part of fun festivals and dance? How do we empower communities to utilize this as a strategy? These are strategies that we use, and so I'll go over some of those strategies, and I put a lot of pictures in. I always like pictures better than text. So Lauren already went into what is a science festival. There are some kind of general kind of ideas that we want to just stress is that it's a series of science events that happen over an extended period of time. So often science festivals can be anywhere from 3 days to as much as ours, which is about 5 weeks. And so it really is picking a discrete period of time and kind of ramping up a celebration. So a lot of the times we may have a astronomy festival or a music festival. We celebrate it in the same sort of fashion. What's also interesting about festivals, usually there's different venues. So you could have a festival event here, you could have it at a big convention center, you could have it at a park, you could have it in a school classroom. Basically any place could be a festival. We could have it in a coffee shop, we could have it in a restaurant, you could do the science of food, there's in physics, you can find a physics application basically with almost anything in life. And so that's important pieces. There's many and diverse collaborators. And so one thing that is important to stress is that we brought in today, you're going to hear from about 6 or 7 of our collaborators. We have a total of 450 organizations that work with us. And so our organization itself plans maybe 1 or 2 events, if that, during the year. But it allows everybody from around the state to really do what they do best and wrap it all together into a big umbrella, which is the Arizona SciTech Festival. And so here are some summary numbers. As I mentioned, we have about 450 collaborators. There's 400 events that occurred during the festival this last year. We had 240 venues. We had about 260,000 attendees that occurred around the state. And then we had, throughout Arizona, there's about 90 cities and towns. We had about 40 of them have some type of event. So we actually got a lot of locations throughout the communities. Now, if this is a strategy that you're interested in doing, it definitely doesn't have to be the scale of what we do. And the reason why we brought in collaborators from different communities is it could be the model what one of them has done to create almost mini festivals that we have throughout the larger event. And that will probably make sense as we go through the day further. Here's a map that we plotted out all the various venues that happen around the state. So this is kind of our general region. So we're in Scottsdale right now. You almost drove the Tempe, and so that's kind of a pictorial representation of where the events were in Maricopa County, and here's a pictorial representation of the state. And so we just want to provide an impression of that the events do occur all over the place throughout Arizona. So going into some of the strategies that we have for the festival, the first one that we like to talk about is the word sneaky science. And so the idea of how do you really integrate science into something that's fun every day? How do you get the public, kids and their families excited about science? And so we have a couple examples that we have that relate to that. The first is sports. So baseball is a big thing here in Arizona. We got spring training. We actually had a spring training festival, and as part of that, we integrated the science of baseball. And so, as a physics teacher, there's tons of experiments that you can do about the physics of baseball. Or we had events going through, like, we had motion detectors on this left one where we were actually clocking bat speed. And so you'd have these people coming because they like baseball. We had, a lot of, there was bands, there was souvenirs with a lot of the different teams that have spring training out here. People also came and got sneaky science, so they were actually exposed to science of baseball while they were out here. And so we had a lot of different collaborators that were part of this. So us as an organization went out to different organizations. So we might have had a science teacher do one event, and there might have been somebody from a university, and there might have been a city, and it all came together. So our science center, for example, did one of the activities on what's kind of the guts of a baseball and the science behind what is the baseball itself. We had a professor doing the science of how you actually see the optics involved. But we also had an event, we had the science of hockey as another example of an event. So sports, we found, at least in Arizona, has been a really good draw for kind of sneaky science. Has anybody heard of the Renaissance Festival? The idea was we integrated the history of science into this event. And so we had characters that were science characters, so like Galileo and Da Vinci. We had a person doing astronomy at this event. And so we picked a lot of science topics that were part of this festival, and it actually helped that festival create kind of a new energy or buzz to their event. And so we had, this event draws 250,000 people over the course of many weekends. We targeted one weekend and probably got about 20,000 people engaged in science by having it as part of this event. And so that was kind of another example of sneaky science. We've also had groups integrate science with dance. And so they do the physics of dance. They do kind of technology, art, and science. So this group is a group of indigenous artists that actually will hack technology and make new instruments with science and technology. So that's another one that is really exciting aspect. This is, if anybody watched Star Wars? Yeah. So Tempe is kind of known for kind of, we call it geek. Is geek a word that, I don't know if geek translates, but it's
maybe can be a strange one.
Strange one, all right. So kind of a strange one in science or technology. We have this event in Tempe called Geeks Night Out, and it was kind of a fun thing, but it really embraced kind of the science fiction and science overlap, and it got the whole community engaged. So some of the impressive things is this one here is the former mayor of that city. And he was crazy. He was kind of crazy enough to dress up in a Darth Vader outfit and be part of that event. This is a giant, I'm not sure if you've ever seen the Etch-a-Sketches. It's like a kid's toy, but they made it 3 stories high, so several buildings high, and you could actually use this kid toy at this event. So kind of fun technology opportunities at this location. So that's kind of the sneaky science idea. The second idea is that how do you really look what's in your backyard and bring people to those venues? And so fortunately around here we have different industries. We have technology, and so we had people taking tours of places like Microchip. So they got to see a lot of various machines that might do 3D printing, or people that make different semiconductors, just a lot of technologies. But we also had places that might make cars. This is Modern, I think it's Modern Motor, I forgot the name of the company actually, Modern Motors I think it is, and this is a bioscience company that we had that people did tours. But the great thing is we had a lot of average locations do it too. So you might have had a local bakery do a tour of the yeast of bread, or a hair salon do disulfide bonds in the hair products and making perms. And so there's ways to really bring science into everyday activities that you're doing. The third strategy, and we have a lot of people here today from this group, which is the schools and the universities. So what we call it PK, which is pre-kindergarten, to 20, which is graduate level university. And so we have a speaker here today that will talk about their event that they did at Arizona State University. But it really is a way that schools can actually have phenomenal events as part of their local community, but also potentially tie together with a lot of collaborators in the region. The one thing to stress is that there's not one formula to do it. The best formula is you pick what it is that fits your community best. And so there's been science festivals, for example. Lauren's been able to reach out to collaborators in Egypt, and there's probably about 6 festivals that occur in Egypt, which are going to be very different than if you see the festival in San Diego versus the one in Australia. And so really there's not a one-size-fits-all. And one of the advantages, we have Cal here to talk, who actually helped start a festival in a rural region in Arizona, which I don't know if that represents more what the conditions you might be working with, but I wanted to provide a lot of examples so that can provide ideas of what to do. So a lot of these events can really help to get the students engaged. And one of the important things that we find, and Vicki will talk to this with her experience as well, is that the students at these festival events can come and they can enjoy the interactions, but what's really exciting is that they can also be proactive and showcase what they're excited about. So one distinction I would say between like a science fair and a science festival is a kid could show anything. It could be a catapult, it could be making a GAC experiment, it could be demonstrating a scientific experiment that they did in class. It doesn't have to be the most innovative thing, but it's innovative for them, and it's innovative for them to communicate that information to their peers. And that's really how you start to get it as part of a community perspective, as opposed to something that is just one student presenting a project. And so the other thing is they have tied science festivals together with science fairs, which was what they did in Sholo, and it helps to actually generate an increased community engagement and further buzz for their events. STEM, that's a good question. So we overuse an acronym here called STEM, and it's science, technology, engineering, and math. So the other piece that's important, and we have Odette, she's not here yet, she'll be coming in a little bit, is how it's been helpful to engage communities. So cities and towns, your government, it's really a way for them to actually proactively engage in science and technology. And so a lot of the times they're not really sure what they can do, whereas this has really helped them connect with all the different stakeholders in their community. So it could be the science teachers, it could be the universities, it could be the local businesses. You know, everybody can do something related to a science festival. And the communities we found, the cities, have really taken on a really impressive role in many of the festivals that have happened around the state. And so some of these pictures, that's our the one in the middle is a picture of our governor. She was involved to help kick it off. The one on the bottom right, that's another picture of a mayor. That's in Tempe at the Geek. We always get great pictures of the Geeks Night Out events. But anyway, that's another strategy. Cal will talk to this a lot more, but they have been very effective at providing rural communities that may not have as many resources, strategies to engage in STEM, because they may not have a science center, they may not have a lot of business and industry, but they've still had ways to use a festival as a way to communicate science to the public and to the population. The other thing, I don't know how this might build, but the way that we support it is by having sponsors provide funding. But what we have found really exciting about our efforts is the sponsors are engaged. And so they come to the events, they take part in the events in addition to providing us money. And that's something that we want them to feel that it's their festival as much as us. So, the people that are coming today, our goal is that the collaborators feel ownership and that it's partially theirs, so that no one organization has that ambiance. It's really shared amongst the community, and that's really important to us based upon just experience in doing these. And also just collaborators. Mm-hmm.
Sponsor just for financial support?
Correct. And our financial support comes from both money, but also they can provide what we like to call trade. And so a lot of the collateral, the printed materials, the sponsors will actually print them out. And
So, but you were saying that the sponsors actually do things at the festival?
Correct.
They don't just get money?
That's right. So this one's one of the solar companies, and she was so crazy. They went to 12 events, and this one she actually got into the Geeks Night Out and actually wore her Star Trek outfit. Or, the medical one, Midwestern, they had a tour on campus. Arizona State University is a major sponsor of the event, and they do one of the largest kind of open house expos of the event, which Margaret will talk to when she comes on. So like in the pictures here, this one right here, this is have you guys heard of Intel? So Intel is a big presence in Arizona. They actually had an open house tour for people to come to Intel. And so they had the engineers showcase what are some of the innovations at Intel. The picture at the far right with the person blowing the straw is actually from a company called Boeing, which makes a lot of helicopters and airplanes in Arizona. And so they came out and demonstrated. They set up flight simulators and a lot of, I think that one was I actually don't know what he was demonstrating, that one myself, but you might. The idea is easy to sell. because it's good for the company. They can invest in the future, as Cal said, for the long sale. But also the other sale is that they get good exposure. Like somebody said, you get PR. We have 260,000, and this is something I want to hand out in a sec. We have a lot of printed materials, but we hand these out in all the school districts. So, for example, in Mesa schools, they handed out 50,000 program schedules to all the students. Now, when you put those logos on there, that's a way that they can actually justify those dollars. But furthermore, a lot of the companies want to showcase what they do to the public. A lot of companies also like to communicate with other companies. So as the festival brings 450 collaborators together, it gives them an easy way to communicate with kind of their stakeholders. That's at least some ideas. But each partner has a different agenda and motivation of why they want to provide support. So, for example, we have a sponsor that provided money in southern Arizona. So you're driving up from Tucson. There's a sponsor there called the Thomas R. Brown Foundations that typically would not give money that often to people that are in Scottsdale or Maricopa County. But because we were wanting to use the money to have a person in Tucson really build events in that area, they were very willing to provide support so that we would have somebody on the ground to build it in their community. But a lot of the things is that a lot of these events that are happening at the city level, they try to find resources that already exist. So to run a festival isn't that expensive. And so I don't know what, Cal, your budget was, but I think it was under $5,000. The city of Chandler, which had a pretty large festival, their budget was probably under $5,000. And so it's a matter of saying, what are what we call the word assets? What do we have in terms of buildings and people? And I mean, you can almost take this community that you have right here and say, let's build a festival with this alone. We each have 100 students. So we now have 500 presenters that we could have at our event and make a major expo. But the resources it doesn't have to be that expensive. We have done 2 years. So we've had 2 festivals. The festival that Laura and I started in San Diego is now on its 5th year. And in Flagstaff, which is the northern part of Arizona, they've had a festival that's now been running for 24 years. So I have more information on the evaluation. I can go into that if you'd like me to in terms of the time. I personally, as kind of my background as a scientist, I don't like to do stuff that doesn't show promise. And so I think the most important thing is to evaluate it and make sure that it's actually doing what you intend to. And so we have some, I think, fairly convincing data that shows that it is a really effective strategy. And the individual events with Margaret, with your PowerPoint, it had some really impressive data as well. So the individual events have data too, and some of that will be presented. So this is some of the numbers which, this isn't like we had an external evaluator, but some of it you can actually get yourself. And so this goes into some of if I go and try to sell a sponsor, this is the type of data I like to show them in terms of just the general exposure of numbers. Do you guys get mail? You still have mail? Okay, we have one of the pieces in your bag was is there an extra one? Yeah. Oh, perfect. So this is good stuff, actually, the extra one. But so this one here is the Spring Training Festival. This went into, it's reached 300,000 people just with this one alone by going into 70,000 homes. So they stuffed it in every mail. And this advertised Scottsdale, which we're in Scottsdale now, their festival. But the idea was to provide a good example of different festivals and the collateral pieces. This is the city of Glendale, which is another city in Arizona, and they had their own event. So the idea is kind of like, you have McDonald's in Oman? Yes. So they run it on a franchise system. So people really I imagine a McDonald's in Oman is going to be different than a McDonald's here. But the reason why is it takes on that character of what the culture is. If you go to McDonald's in Australia, it's going to be pretty different than a McDonald's in Sweden. But they really utilize that model for people to use the brand and expand it. So there could be, for example, it could be a whole country level festival in Oman, and then each community has it. Or it could be starting from a city where you're located and building a festival. And those are things we could talk throughout the day of really figuring out. And the great thing is we have all these experts coming in that can provide you feedback of what worked and did not work in their communities to make that happen.
Is it right here?
We do that. So these pieces here, On the back of this one shows kind of the levels that we have. So we like to use kind of maybe scientific levels. So we have maybe metals, platinum, silver. Our bottom level is krypton. So we tried to kind of play with it a little bit. But yeah, in each level you have different exposure values. So kind of like just like building a big festival and event, we have those sponsorships. And the events themselves, also some of them do have sponsorship. And so, for example, Cal, when he goes in, he'll show you the bag. They had their own sponsorship at their event. So here's some media that we had to get the word out. So we had a lot of commercials that went on TV. We had radio. And the thing to stress is we really did our best to do more in trade. And so, for example, we didn't pay any money for the commercials, but we swapped it for the sponsorship. Or instead of paying for someone to print it, we did the trade. And our attitude is the more that we can do on trade, the better, because the less that the festival costs, the easier it's going to be to keep it going. And so the more that can be swapped, the better. And they kind of have ownership and buy-in when they do that. So if somebody's making the commercial, they'll say, that's my commercial. What are the conditions to participate? We don't set too many conditions on the participation, and we really let people kind of make it their own.
Anyone?
I think there's some barriers that we may have, like if there's something that really is not science at all, I think we would probably say no, that wouldn't work. And then the other question was, is it free? Most of the events are free. We don't go in and we tell somebody you cannot charge for the event, but generally about 90% of the events in the Arizona Festival are free. And most of the communities share that vision that they want to have open access. But there are some events they charged a minimal fee to basically keep themselves going. And, it's your call, obviously. I personally think if they need a way to keep it going, it's okay. And if they can draw the crowds, that's fine. And so here's the data stuff, and I'm just going to highlight some of the important pieces of data, but I want to start with the agenda as well. A lot of our speakers it's awesome, a lot of the people are already here. In terms of the agenda, Vicky's going to start off and talk about a festival that they did from their schools. And so we really wanted to talk about what could be done from a school community perspective. And then we're going to have John Drury talk about how it's really integrated with art and culture. And he's put a lot of time. He actually used to work for Disney as a creator, and he's been trying to figure out ways to blend art with science. We then will go into Arizona State University with Margaret, who did this phenomenal event called Night of the Open Door. And then we have a representative from the city of Chandler that'll talk about their community's perspective. We have Cal from Cal Manis, who actually traveled from Sholo, so the other direction. He did the festival in rural communities. And then we have a professor coming from U of A. His name's Bruce Bailey, and he has a traveling show. He'll be here later on. And finally, we have a person that also did a festival in a rural community called Casa Grande, and so she's going to talk about her experience there. So the data, I love the data. That's my favorite part as a scientist. But the one kind of the quick thing is just the data shows that people are heavily interested and engaged. We get very positive results. Typically, I guess in America, people will usually respond positively, so I guess it's not surprising. But I think what is surprising is that because we're not doing the events, people consistently like what they see. So they like Cal's event, they like Vicky's event, and they're not communicating about common things that they want to do, but they are meeting the interests and motivations of their audiences, which I think is absolutely interesting and stunning to me, is that it's probably going to be good, whatever you create, and that's a good thing to know. And this slide basically talks to the fact that it's getting better. So people are telling us that they had a better experience in the second year than the first year. And it's good to see that the events are improving and people are noticing that. We also did surveys at the events where people gave us their email addresses, and then we followed up with them later and asked them, did you actually do something with the information you learned? And we actually found that people were looking stuff up on the internet, they were talking to their friends. But that's another metric that you can look at that is actually having some form of behavioral impact on their based upon their experience. We also asked our collaborators, so some of the collaborators in here were part of that survey, but in general, the collaborators were very pleased with their experience in terms of was it worth their time, did they, get increased business or traffic to their organizations, and consistently we found really good results. from collaborators, as well as even behavioral data saying that they did actually have people come and visit their organization as a result of engaging in the festival. So if you take a business, why would I want to engage? We have data showing that if you engage, you will have increased traffic at your organization, which is kind of nice to have. And then this is just my contact information. It's also on the program schedules, and I'll be around all day. So that's my piece, and I appreciate the attention and time, but the more important thing is, one thing that's different about our festival is that we don't really run the events. We have phenomenal collaborators that make it their own in their communities, and so they're more the experts of what's happening than anybody else.